Welcome back to Edge of Intelligence, where we explore how strategy, systems, and smart technology converge to shape the next era of work. I'm Carl Owen, a fractional CIO and AI advisor with Protelligent. Today, we're diving into one of the most transformative frontiers in business automation, the rise of AI agents, autonomous digital employees that can take on repetitive, routine tasks so humans can focus on higher value creative work. My guest is Werner Stucky, founder and CEO of Stubber, a company building customized AI employees that help businesses scale faster, work smarter, and serve customers better. Werner's career spans from co-founding an ISP across 6 African countries to pioneering the agent-based automation movement. If you've ever wondered what comes after chatbots, what it takes to design a real digital coworker, or how to integrate agents safely into your operations, this is your episode. Werner, take us back to the beginning. What was the spark behind Stubber? What problem did you see, and how people were using chatbots and automation that made you think there's a better way through true AI agents?
Yeah, I think where we started was actually with a conceptual framework, and we actually started many years before large language models and trying to build a framework to automate humans. And in building this framework, we made it very dependent on language. So the conceptual framework we have uses a lot of verbs and nouns for certain parts of the framework. And so when large language models came out, I think we were about 6 months into building the platform when large language models came out. And so we found like it was actually quite serendipitous to find that link between large language models. So we pivoted completely and made it an AI, agent building platform. So we were actually AI agent first, from, ChatGPT or GPT 3.5's days already.
Let's unpack what that actually means, because agents have become a buzzword, but the reality of building a digital workforce is far more complex and fascinating. The world's been chasing chatbots for years, but most still fail to deliver meaningful business value. Stubbs' approach flips that script, turning AI into active teammates, not text boxes. For listeners new to Stubber, what problem are you solving, and who feels the pain the most? Operation, customer service, sales, leadership?
Yeah, so I think okay, let's jump back to chatbots. So I think the chatbots, everybody hates chatbots that worked with the previous deterministic flow based chatbots, right? They worked on keywords and they always got it wrong. And so just putting a large language model behind that already just gives you a boost. But that's very easy to do. I mean, that's a prompt and some context or RAG pipeline, and you can answer questions, but that's not really adding as much value. So what we're trying to do is go further steps in the process. What we're trying to do is go end to end, like the full end-to-end process. And so that means access to APIs, access to back-end software, that you can actually resolve the user's query, not just allow them to self-assist themselves, give them answers to common questions. So it's that going deeper into the organization, going deeper into the problem that the organization needs solved. A lot of our customers, they sort of, when we start meeting with them, they speak about these deflection rates, like can they deflect customers from hitting their back-end call centers with the common questions. And I think those metrics that's the incorrect metric, right? You don't want to say thank God the customer didn't get through to our call center or didn't call us because we could answer their stupid question, or they helped themselves via the portal. You actually want to just assist them all the way through. Like if they had a billing inquiry, just answer their question as the call center would have done it off the bat. So that's really, I think, where the other difference between chatbots that we commonly explain to people is that LLMs have the ability to get to the user's intent, or the human's intent, in one sentence. And so what you really get rid of, you get rid of all of these kind of menu-based systems. I mean, if you think of it, portals and even apps with menus and IVRs when you dial into a call center, they're all trying to determine intent, right? And they're trying to filter you into some sort of intent bucket that someone can serve you better. And large language models can just get that off the bat, right? Your first sentence, they can maybe have a clarifying question, but they can get to your intent really quickly. And I think that's at the front level, that friction reduction for your customers is what large language models bring to the table.
Well, you've written about the failed promise of chatbots. What did the industry get wrong, and how does your agent-based model fix it?
Yes, so that was an interesting article. Yeah, I wrote that blog a while ago. I think the chatbots, the previous crop of chatbots had high aspirations, but I don't think the technology was there. And that's why many people hate when we speak about chatbots. Most of the customers are like, no, we don't want that. We've tried it. And they haven't realized. I think more people have realized now that the world's moved on and that large language models are the way to go. When you build it right, the end customer shouldn't be able to tell that it's not a human on the other end, right? They some of these chatbots connect you to a live agent, and that should be the same feeling, right? If you took that, if you faked the little live icon there, they should not be able to tell that it's a computer system or automated system. That's the level you want to build to. I know in some jurisdictions you need to disclose that you're speaking to an AI, but in certain cases where we've tested these type of things and built them and just engaged as a human with a name, it's very difficult to tell that it's not a human. Maybe because it's responding too fast. Some of our customers have asked us to slow down their responses to make it even more human-like. But that's what you're getting to. Two things we usually say to our customers: that the public or anybody using the system shouldn't be able to tell that it's not just a live agent, and there should be no training of any sort necessary if you build the agent right. Sometimes we build agents that work on internal systems, and the interface is only via chat interface or via SMS or messages or via email. So there's no training necessary. There's no user interfaces. There's no specific information you have to send. It's just speaking to an intelligent agent. That's makes it really smooth.
It's really been interesting to watch the shift from chatbots to agents to now AI employees. Walk us through what an AI employee looks like in practice. What are its capabilities and how does it plug into existing systems?
Yeah, so I think that the AI agent definition is all over the place. Everyone's got a different version of what that means. For us, we focus on building independent agents. So I'd say like the majority of agents are sort of human augmentative agents. They're assisting you, to write marketing copy, or they're, assisting you to perform tasks faster. What we're mostly building for customers is end-to-end independent autonomous agents. So they work without human supervision. They're not augmenting the humans in their position. They're just fulfilling the entire position. So, for example, maybe an example of like a more integrated agent that we've built is a purchase order approval agent. And so it would just have an email address. So you give it an email address, just like you give an employee in your organization, and you just email it, expenses or costs that need to be approved within the organization. The agent would then find the correct person that's allowed to approve that cost, whatever it may be. Came in via PDF or an image or a handwritten quote, any of those type of documents. Find the correct person that's responsible for that expense, and then reach out to that person over direct messaging, get the approval, and then reach into the ERP system and create that purchase order once it's been approved, and then just email it back to the requester. So really what it's doing is like fulfilling that end-to-end job. And so I think for our rule of thumb is for every 20% of the job that you can complete, you're doubling the value, right? If you could do just 20% of that job, if you could just effectively read out the document and correctly get all the line items and all the quantities and all the, the item costs, that would have been worth, X amount of dollars. But if you can do 40%, it doubles, 60% doubles, 80%, 100% double each time. That's sort of our rule of thumb. And we've seen that something magical happens when you can end to end just eliminate the full job out of the organization, because then it's automated in perpetuity. The customers we build that purchase approval for, they can scale to 1,000 times. The agent that does that job just does that job, 1,000 times, 10,000 times, 100,000 times, when it's done right. And with humans, you have to keep scaling out the team, and at a certain stage, when the team gets too big, you need to put a human ahead of them to sort of the structure needs to go like this. It can't just scale horizontally. So I think that's the promise of agents.
Yeah, I agree with you. What someone comes to you and says, okay, I want to build my first agent. What does it take for a business to go from zero to its first operational agent? What's the timeline look like? What are there specific data requirements that you need? And what's the integration process look like?
Yes, so not many customers just come off the bat and say, I want to build my first agent. Usually what we tell customers is that, so much has become possible that was impossible previously without large language models. So much has become possible over the last 2.5 years that really the winning strategy is picking what to build, not, just building, 100 different things. So we usually advise customers to go deep before going wide. What we mean by that is like first, find the right use case and then automate it all the way through. Go really put it into the real world, put it into some subsection of your business, and then test it, and iterate, improve it until you can do that entire function really well before jumping to the next. So that's usually where it starts, like use cases, getting the use cases right. And then I think what's probably not said enough is that a lot of the work is non-AI type stuff. It's getting access to APIs. It's getting access to databases. It's speaking to internal IT teams. That's where a lot of the work happens, right? There's still a lot of engineering architecture that needs to be done in the background to get that working. So that's usually some sort of project that we engage on with a customer. It's also good to define certain metrics. Say, what does success look like? We should be bringing the time down by a certain amount. We should be, increasing the throughput. We should eliminate this amount of work in the business. Having real metrics always allows us, and we love that. Because that's the challenge, right? That's if there's a clear yes, you've succeeded or no, you haven't. That expectation helps as well, especially when it comes to going then abroad after you've went deep to go wide across the business. If you've really solved one really well and everybody can agree that this is solved and this has got a great return on investment, then you get access to do more.
Well, how do you balance customization versus scalability? I mean, building agents that feel bespoke but still deploy quickly across use cases.
So we've actually come up with a sort of a internal categorization. We call it the 3 categories of agents. So we categorize category 1 as sort of off the shelf, and usually off the shelf is probably an agent that like touches at maximum two systems and requires little to no configuration. So for example, maybe email receipt into some kind of online accounting package like Xero. So 2 systems, doesn't really engage, just read the document into Xero. And then the second one, the category 2 agents in our definition is anything that's got sort of a pre-built template, but is probably going to take 10, 20, 30, 40 hours to config. You're going to need to provide APIs. You're going to need to work with internal teams about the nuances of that process. So this is like a purchase approval agent. Some kind of sales agent for a more complex sales flow where you might need to know the nuances of the product, which items fit with which items, the quoting rules, those type of things. And then we've got category 3, which is from scratch, completely unique build. Like there isn't something like this in the world. You start on a blank slate and you build it up. And this is typically like very niche use cases. And now we're talking, in the hundreds of hours of engineering time to build this out. Some of the stuff we're building is in the regulatory space, where you've got, in the pharmaceutical industry, where you've got like highly trained professionals working on huge amounts of data, PDF data sets, and we're building agents that can look at these data sets and find specific pieces of information to do regulatory filing for new drugs, those type of really deep use cases. I mean, there's no template, no one's built it before. You literally just start from scratch, iterate, see how far you can get through the problem. So yeah, three categories that we put them into generally, and that just helps us also like sort of give the customer indication of what is cost going to look like, what is the timeline to production.
Well, you've alluded to this already, but agents live at the intersection of LLMs, APIs, and business logic. But the real magic is in the orchestration, right? So getting them to act reliably in a dynamic, messy environment. So under the hood, what makes an agent truly autonomous? How do you blend reasoning, memory, and tool use safely?
Yeah, I think that is really the trick to get right, and that takes a lot more engineering than just throwing a big prompt at the problem and then hoping for the best. I think we do something called progressive prompt injection. So we're stepping the agent through a process, over a conversation, and putting it into different states as we go along. And so we can control the access to tools at the different stage of the process, and we can progressively improve the prompt, or progressively inject prompts into the context window as we run through the process in our platform. And that was built in back in the day already. So it's just proved very useful now with large language models as well. And I see this has been referred to now as context engineering, instead of prompt engineering, or context engineering now. We keep seeing these words and we're like, oh wow, we were doing that, but they get these new buzzwords come along. But yeah, there's a trick to it, and that I think we've done stuff in the airline industry, for example, and we built like a fully autonomous travel agent for an airline. You can book via voice notes or whatever. I want to fly out on Friday night, I want to fly back on Sunday morning, these two cities, and it can guide you through this whole process of booking the seat, changing your seat, canceling your flight, changing flights, all of these type of things. And the airline industry is notoriously risk averse. The reason I'm going with the story is that there was the famous Air Canada incident where they had a bot and gave someone a discount, and so these forerunners, or these trailblazers that built without the safeguards, built without the right frameworks, they sort of make it harder for people coming in and wanting to do it correctly, because now you have to go and explain to the customer, right, this is not the same thing. We're not just throwing a big prompt at the problem and hoping for the best, right? We're very closely controlling the process that we're going through. We're only providing the LLM, access to certain very constrained tools. We're doing validation as the LLM is calling these tools. It's a very different world out there from the early days. So yeah, that's how you get it. How you get it done is right. Having the right frameworks, having a lot of guardrails, tools to your disposal to make sure you're building the correct way.
Yeah, there's still a lot of confusion out there around LLMs, agents, prompting, all of that stuff. So can you share with us some of the biggest misconceptions you hear when leaders say we want to add an agent?
Yeah. So yeah, we hear a lot, and when dealing with a lot of clients, you realize that this industry is still very, very new. I often tell people that I get deja vu because my younger brother and I, we started an internet service provider, and we were still quite young at that time. And we started out selling internet service, and then we branched out into building websites. And we used to go door to door sales to businesses selling websites. And I can distinctly remember we going to different businesses and saying, we build your website, it's a way to put yourself on the internet. And they would say, no, we have internet. We wanted to sell them a website, and they would say, no, we have internet. And sometimes they didn't even have an internet service. They only had an email address. But I think internet was the big buzzword, and the more specific things underneath internet, like a website, an email address, a DSL or a dial-up connection, those hadn't yet become commonplace names. And I think with AI, that is currently the problem, right? They say, we go in and we say we build AI agents, and they say, we have AI. And then when you dig a little bit further, you realize, right, they've signed up for a Copilot license, or something like that.
Yeah, we're using ChatGPT. We're doing AI.
We're doing AI, exactly, yes. So you get varied amounts of understanding across the spectrum, right? And you really can't place it. You can't say, it's a large corporate enterprise, I'm going to deal with people that know what they're talking about. Sometimes the small company knows more, sometimes the big CTO knows more, and sometimes the opposite. So there's a lot of I think education needed in the market still. I think we sometimes see these AI training companies, and I think they do provide an important role, especially in the beginning of a new industry, to just sort of get the words and the nomenclature out there. I think even within the AI industry, we're not even clear on the words ourselves. I mean, agents. So I think it's also partly our own problem for not defining them well enough. So yeah, I think your original question, like what do we define as an agent, or what do people understand from agent? Sorry, I think I've veered far from your original question by now.
That's all right. That's all right. Well, are there cases where you see organizations when they should not use an agent, where traditional scripts or deterministic workflows still are the better choice?
Definitely, yes. Yeah, we see a lot of people, and even with our own solution architects, a lot of time of the time we see them just throwing an LLM at the problem, where you're like, no, that is deterministic world. That is you're going to be building build that a piece of code that handles that. Where it's very tempting to just run it through an LLM. There's certain things that definitely still need to be done deterministically. That definitely still exists. I often tell some of the solution architects working on our team, what we're really building is we're building software that gets used by LLMs. The frameworks and the APIs and the tools we're building software that LLMs will use. And so we really have to adopt the same principles as when you're building software for humans, right? You have to have validations on what they're inputting. You have to, have guardrails. You can't just give an LLM, write access to the entire database. Those type of, general principles. It's a lot of people just forget to trust the LLM. It will do it right. You can't build like that. Not for production in any case.
Well, that's one of the things I see with some of my clients. They're afraid of the LLMs because they will ask it, or they'll input a prompt and it'll give them an answer, and they don't know how it got the answer, and it can't tell them how it did the reasoning. Now, some of them are getting better about that now, but how do you ensure observability, control, and compliance so an agent's decisions can be audited like a human's?
Yeah, so we really like the reasoning models have really stepped it up in that aspect. And sometimes we do switch out the flow. So in our platform, you can easily just flip between the different models. And sometimes it's worthwhile flipping to an open model like DeepSeek, just so that you can see the thinking output. Some of the proprietary providers like OpenAI don't allow you to see the thinking, the reasoning. And so maybe that's a separate question, or a separate point on this, is that sometimes we do switch to an open model just in the design time to sort of spot hidden, or some misses that we've done in the context, right? Sometimes in the reasoning, when we can really think and see the reasoning, we'll see, wait, there's some context that's missing, and we only spot that when we investigate the actual thinking. So I really do hope the proprietary providers also give access to that thinking, which is really helpful for prompting again. But yes, in terms of the auditability and the safeguards and that type, we do save all of that. We have nice interfaces where you can sort of audit and look through those things. And then we do have these safety harness mechanisms where we have a conversational agent, and we have a second agent that checks every single output of the conversational agents. The conversational agent seeing the entire back and forth interaction, and the checker is just watching each response as it gets generated and watching for certain things. So certain financial institutions that are highly regulated, they require that kind of safety harness. May not give financial advice. This agent may not do this, may not do this. I must say that the newer models, the latest models are a huge step up from the previous models in terms of adhering to that. I see OpenAI also released now a new safety, specifically a safety compliance model that they're open sourcing to do this, that does this really well, just specifically for safety. Because it's been released as open source, I think hopefully the fast inference providers like Cerebras or Grok with a Q, we always need to be very specific in this industry because there's now two Groks, that they will adopt that model, because that's very latency intensive. You can't have a conversational agent with a checker and then add those two latencies on top of each other. Then the conversation becomes really but too jumpy. So when we put these safety harness agents on, we usually always use the fast inference providers like Cerebras or Grok for that purpose.
Can you talk to us a little bit about your tech stack? What frameworks or models power Stubber's agents, and how do you evaluate performance?
Yeah, everything is an in-house tech stack. So we run our own platform. So we're not based on any kind of underlying framework. It's our own framework, our own conceptual framework, and then we've written all the software stack from the ground up. So we run our own data centers, and then the virtualization layer, containerization, and everything above it. So but we don't train any of our own models, and we don't do fine tuning. We've had requests for fine tuning. I don't think it's time fine tuning yet. I mean, you just wait for the better model. It usually sorts all the problems out, unless you've got like a very niche use case. So we don't do any of that. So we just plug into the foundational models and use the best of breed models that the customers want to use for different purposes. So usually on a flow within Stubber, you've got mainly 3 different models that you use. One for the conversation, one for like a deeper reasoning or a validation or a checker, and then one to handle sort of media inputs. There we're usually using our preferences at this point is usually the OpenAI models for conversational, then any kind of reasoning models for the reasoning, and then the Gemini models for media are very good at looking at the PDFs, any PDFs, images, reading out data from that. This is our current preference, but I must say, I mean, that's current. This might be outdated by next week.
Yeah, blink and it changes. It's unbelievable. Give us a wow story, a client or pilot where agents produced measurable impact or freed up serious human hours.
Yeah, so I think the most bullish case that I usually have for customers, anything sales related, where the sale requires some kind of back and forth. So usually if you're selling online, right, you either like an Amazon, right, somebody needs a kettle, click on the kettle, buy the kettle, done. I don't think agents will help much with that, unless you're not sure what type of kettle to run. And then on the other end of the spectrum, I think is like selling a fleet of heavy duty vehicles. So that's a very human type interaction. I know people who do that, and it's usually like that happens at a bar or at a party, and you've got your guy that you're buying from. So I don't think agents will replace that, but I think everything in between, where there's some sort of back and forth that is needed, some kind of quote, some kind of configuration to the sale, the agents have a phenomenal effect there. So because you can shorten the friction and you can immediately build rapport with the customer on the website. So we've actually sold a heavy duty vehicle on a Sunday night. One of our agents actually sold a heavy duty vehicle on a chat interface on a cell phone without the person actually knowing he was dealing with not dealing with a human. So it configured the trailer that he needed, the tonnage for the heavy haulage that he was wanting to do, and it configured, emailed him a PDF quote, requested all of his bank details and his company registration information, and he actually called into the dealership the next morning, on the Monday morning, and he said, "Hi, I want to speak to Aiden." And they had to explain to him that Aiden wasn't a real person, and he just bought quite an expensive asset. So that's the level to which that happens. Anything sales related. We've also put, instead of the standard chatbots, just an LLM that greets you and speaks to you selling vehicles on some vehicle brands, websites, and they've seen as much as 100% increase in the sales through that channel just from a chatbot, not the traditional chatbots. And I think this comes down to human nature. Humans will find the most frictionless path always, right? We are incredibly lazy. Put frequently asked question chatbots on pages, and on one of the airlines we did this on, there's basically a little chat button and you click and it pops up.
Right.
I can't tell you how many people open that chat, and then they ask the agent, "What is your call center number?" And literally the call center number is on the page behind the chatbot, right? But people just, when they see a chat, just gravitate to the chat, open it up, and then, because they know they can get to the answer quickly, right? They don't want to read websites anymore. Nobody wants to read through frequently asked questions. Nobody wants to dig through tons of pages of websites. They want answers. They want them now. I think everybody's attention spans have become so short that you literally need, it's an arms race, to give them the fastest information.
Yeah.
So cool stories. Yes, I think selling a heavy duty vehicle. We also had what I think was probably might have been a world first, is back in the GPT 3.5 days. We actually do a lot of different language conversations on our implementations as well. I mean, South Africa has 11 different official languages,
right?
And so we usually in the prompt say, use the preferred language of the person you're speaking with. And we use the whisper model for audio detection as well within our platform. And we actually had this complex use case for a customer dealing with revenue assurance. And the person actually just reached out, very friendly, just handled the use case, didn't really say much about being an AI bot, whatever. And the person was just engaging naturally with the agent, and he spoke in Afrikaans, but he spoke English with an Afrikaans accent. Sorry, not Afrikaans. He spoke English with an Afrikaans accent. And I think there was one word in his entire sentence, one word that was an Afrikaans word for yes, in a long sentence. And the agent responded to him in perfect Afrikaans. And he was so blown away that the agent, and he was like, wow, now we can speak, in Afrikaans. I'm so happy. You could hear I was really struggling with English. And I'm sure at that point, that person would have never have guessed that he was not speaking to a real person that could understand Afrikaans. That was the early days of GPT. So it's those sort of moments that you can really see the agent's ability to get to really relate to the human, to get closer to them, to build rapport so quickly, which is really, helps smooth these, especially friction for any kind of business process that's got friction in it. Yeah, those are sort of the highlights that we've seen. I could go on and on. So.
Oh, those are cool. Thank you for sharing those. Well, as CIOs and transformation leaders, we're realizing that agents aren't just technology decisions, right? They're more workforce design decisions. When companies first start exploring agents, what operational gaps usually surface? Is it data silos, quality of data, unclear workflows, or resistance to change? That's always a big one.
Yes, definitely resistance to change. Like quality of data, I don't think is much, in my opinion, not such a big problem anymore. I mean, we sometimes go to customers and they say, wait, we don't want to start with agents yet or with AI yet. We first want to clean our data, fix our data. And this is never going to happen, right? We've tried to fix data for the last 10 years. Everybody's data is horrible. Everybody's got a data integrity problem. That's not going to get fixed. I think we've got the humans, and the humans in the organization know how to deal with that messy data. And now we've got LLMs, and LLMs similarly, they can deal with the messy data. So just leave the data as it is, right? Jump the step, forget about that problem. It's not going to get better. Jump straight to LLMs. LLMs can maybe help cleaning up the data if you really want to clean the data. But if you build LLM interfaces, if you build LLM first, you solve the problem of getting the data clean into the future. Because when an LLM runs a tool and collects the data from a human, you're getting it in way cleaner into the backend database than if you had a form, right? People type in all caps in a form, right? They put all sorts of different formats, put double spaces, put a space at the end of their last name. They do all these kind of weird things that, mess up your data integrity, where a large language model gives you way cleaner data into the backend system. So I usually advise clients, start with LLMs. They're already just going to, at least you're fixing the problem into the future, right? You can still go back and clean your old data, but at least LLMs are going to fix your problem into the future. So I don't really see the bad data as being a problem. Resistance to change, there's different parts there. So there's usually within the IT departments, they usually have a lot of this is our area. But I tend to agree with you that it's more operational, more a business than it's about the technology, right? The technology should be secondary. It should be about what is the real return on investment, what is the real impact to the business that you're wanting to get. The technologies should be invisible. Great technology is just invisible. These use cases that I've told you about, the selling the heavy duty vehicles, that person did not know that there was technology there. Even the technology is invisible, and the greatest technology is just invisible. You don't know, it's there. It just smooths everything in the background, and that's really what it should be. But I think, back to your question, the internal resistance is either on the tech side, or it's then on the whoever was doing that job, and are you taking the job? What am I going to do when you automate this mundane job? And right. That's a way trickier one to deal with. We usually see customers, just redeploying people to higher value tasks or more creative type of enterprises. And I do think that's the long term. I think we might go through a dip where there's going to be some pain for certain people, but this mundane work, there is so much mundane work when we go look at customers. So much mundane, repetitive tasks that, it's not inspiring work to be done. And so that's really where we're focusing. Get the boring stuff done by agents. Let the agents handle the boring stuff. One of our integrators, he puts it a little bit differently. He tells his customers, our agents have zero ambition. They will do your purchase order requests for the next 30 years without complaint. They don't need a career path. They don't need, improvement. They have zero ambition and they never get bored. I sometimes tell our customers it's diligence at scale. Because sometimes if you just look at how the agent will think in depth, if you can look at the reasoning, how it will think in depth of such a trivial basic task, it's diligence at scale. But yeah, went a bit off track there, but I think, the answer is the resistance within the organizations. It's the tech resistance, and then it's the resistance from the general people that you're automating that work from.
How do you help leadership teams define the right scope for an agent? I mean, we've talked a little bit about what they shouldn't try to automate, but what shouldn't they try to automate? And how do you help them set the right scope for what they're trying to do?
Yeah, so our go-to is it needs to be conversational. Go look where there are conversational processes. So any process where you're engaging with a customer, you're engaging with an internal person, because those are the use cases we could never automate. Right, there is going to be no workflow for those things, because if you go look at some BPMN diagrams and these SOPs and these type of things that existed in companies. Let's take a BPMN process diagram. You'd see that all the deterministic stuff have been mapped out. But at some point there's email the marketing manager, and then some fuzziness will happen there because that's undefined. The marketing manager will make some kind of decision that's not on the process diagram, and that's inherently conversational. There's some conversational back and forth. There can be from 1 to 20 interactions there in English, in some kind of human language. And so that's our low-hanging fruit. We're saying, look for those because they could never been done. We didn't have large language models. So that's where you can go find it. Second thing we look for is volume, right? Your engineering, there's still a lot of engineering required, right? No matter what people say, these models are far from taking over the world, because if you're working on the grassroots level, you know just how difficult it is to get it to, reliably book a flight is a lot of work, right? It's still a long way off from taking over the world. So the engineering has to justify somehow, and that is looking for volume. So if you're spending a lot of engineering, but the process you're automating is only happening 2 to 3 times a month, it's not worth it. So like employee onboarding, these type of things, unless it's a huge organization, they're not really worth it, but something that's happening daily, multiple times daily throughout the organization, thousands of times, 10,000s of times daily, that's your low-hanging fruit. So the volume, it's really a volume game at this point.
What internal roles or capabilities are essential to manage an agent workforce? I mean, we talked about prompt engineers already, process owners, AI ops. What are you seeing in that?
It's very different, I think, to traditional software development, where it's a deterministic process in traditional software development, and you could sort of scope the project, you could design, you could test, and you could launch. And you have your launch, you might have a few hiccups in your launch phase. With deploying AI agents, right, your variability and the messiness you're dealing with from the real world can't really be mocked out. You can't, it's not, you can't create all those test cases. It's just the possibilities are too big. So we usually say launch into a live environment as soon as possible, call it a beta, put terms and conditions in front of it, and then learn from the real world and iterate. Because we found so much, like you can't imagine the responses you're going to get. You can't imagine the kinds of data set you're going to get from the real world. And so launching quickly, and then that AI ops role becomes very important, because you want to be able to manage that look each week. What are the outliers? What did we do wrong? How do we need to improve the prompt to catch these different scenarios we're seeing in the real world? So I think that the AI ops is the biggest one I think people miss when they come from a traditional software development type of background. They think we can press play, launch into the live environment, and off we go, have our coffee. And that's really how it works. I think the biggest work comes after you've put it into a live environment. So roles that we typically see at our customers, also testing agents, right? So before you put in a live environment, doing just the really basic tests, like trying to get it to go off course, doing homework, writing you a poem, doing all those type of basic checks, and seeing if it will keep to its data validation checks, prompt injection tests. Those ones you can still do beforehand.
Metrics are really important. So a lot of my clients, that's one of the first things they want to talk about is how are we going to measure success, right? We're implementing AI, want to be able to show the value, we want to demonstrate the efficiency saves and all that. So what metrics should an executive dashboard show to prove value? I mean, cost savings is obviously one, but there are many others that we could choose.
I think for me, the time element is a big one. We call it the velocity of business. It increases the velocity of business because if you think about email, there's a long latency on email. If I send an email, right, I'm going to expect a response, right? If I'm lucky, I get one in a few hours. If it's close to the end of the business day, that email latency gets pushed out another 12 hours. If it's on a weekend, it gets pushed out another 48 hours at least. And so when you convert that role into an agent, everything is minutes away in latency. And this is a compounding effect. Like something that takes 20 interactions is now 20 minutes instead of probably a month if you go on some people's email latency. So it speeds up the business. It speeds up that velocity of things happening. So typical metrics that we sort of highlight to customers is work that the agent's done outside of business hours, like the latest point in the day that a purchase order has been submitted and approved and pulled out of the ERP system, right? This is something that would have never been done after the closing hours. And now it's getting done at 12 o'clock at night, right? At 1 a.m. when somebody needs an urgent order placed. And then we also look at records. We look at like the average time the process took to complete in the previous role. So it might have been, 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, some of our purchase order approval use cases. And then the record that we have is 1 minute, 56 seconds, where an email was sent with a complex PDF quotation from a supplier, the correct manager identified, correct manager approved, agent goes into the ERP and builds the line by line, the complex document out of the ERP and back to the supplier. 1 minute, 56 seconds. I mean, that's superhuman. No human could do it that fast. And so those are things that I think you don't think of as a metric because we never measured that. We never thought of this concept of the velocity of a business. We just assumed and took it for granted. So we try and look at those sort of non-obvious metrics as well with our customers.
I read somewhere recently where a large number of AI projects fail. And by fail, they mean, don't meet the ROI that people are talking about. And I think there's a number of reasons for that. It could be lack of trust, could be poor integration, data could potentially be an issue. But what are some of the challenges or root causes that you're seeing when adoption fails or stalls?
Yeah, so that's the MIT report on Gen AI. We actually like that report. We print it out and we give it to our customers as well, which is counterintuitive. We're building these things. I think and telling them that 95% fail.
Right.
So we agree with a lot of the conclusions of that that paper, where they're saying, focus on one thing, iterate, don't try and pull the entire thing, launch it, iterate, improve, go do a different approach to the traditional software mechanism. So we've been lucky to have quite a lot of successes under our belt, and following that use case. I think where a lot of it fails is there's a huge overpromising in the beginning, right? Because of this AI hype, and building demos is easy. We build demos in a matter of hours. We build more complex demos in a matter of days. Building something in production, that's a different story, right? That really, like, all those edge cases catch up with you, right? That 1 in 100 hallucination, that breaks the whole use case. And so having to, keep improving the prompt, like the 50th, 100th, 200th version of the prompt, because this and this and this, you had to go and reiterate, and put in more guardrails and more deterministic checks. That's what gets you. And so if you haven't provisioned enough time, or if you've, went wide and taken on too many tasks all at once, trying to, solve everything all at once, that's where we're cautioning our customers and saying, we find with building just one thing, right? We rather not take all of your business, take one thing, build it properly, and then move to the next one afterwards. This is a long, I think this is more a marathon. People maybe see this industry as like so fast moving and we have to all fix everything all at once. I don't think that's the case. I think building it correctly and, building it right, taking your time sometimes is better. This is going to be a marathon.
Agree. Culture's a big deal too, right? In the adoption of all this stuff. So from your experience, what culture shift do you see that's necessary to make humans comfortable working alongside a digital coworker? That sounds so weird to say now, but digital coworker.
Yeah, so I think that's a difficult one. Like I'm just trying to think what are where the culture shifts were needed in our customers. I think there is just a natural fear of change and fear of this new thing, or like what's going to happen in the sales use cases. We've actually seen the culture shift came after the agent was deployed, where the sales people, nobody was replaced. They just got such high quality leads because they really just got all the mundane cold leads filtered out by the agent. And because there was such an increase in sales, they actually ended up getting more commission. There was just more business for everyone to share in. So it was a win-win in the sales instances. Support instances is different, right? Support instances, it's not really a win-win. If you can do support your customers with less humans, that's just you getting away with less humans. So that on the cost saving side, it's more tricky to get the culture right there. So there you have to either redeploy, retrain. Those type of things have to be in the business, and then it depends on the customer. It depends on different organizations. Have they got this openness to retrain and to redeploy people? Because in all honesty, there's so much slack, especially in large organizations. There's so much stuff falling on the floor where humans have just never got the time to do these type of tasks, go clean up data, to help sort out stuff that humans really need that human touch. But yeah, I haven't really seen how it depends on leadership, right? Each different company's got different leadership guide that culture, and I think it's very difficult from an outside consultancy or platform to influence that.
This whole agent thing is so young, but it's moving incredibly fast. We're already seeing early blueprints for AI stacks of the future, memory layers, orchestration frameworks, secure connectors that let agents collaborate. How do you see the AI employee landscape evolving over the next 3 years, 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, so I definitely think I often give the story where I say that in the future, I predict that 99% of computer-to-computer communication will be in English. And I tell people I think it would be very weird for aliens. If aliens came and they parked and they watched our civilization, just watched us, they would be like, why are these humans as computers speaking to each other in English? And the reason I say this is because like today's world, computer-to-computer interactions are usually in some kind of protocol. So it's HTTP or it's some kind of JSON structured data set. But I think what will happen in organizations is that one organization will have a human, for example, getting invoices in and putting them into an ERP system. They will replace this human with a large language model for efficiency's sake. And the market over time, like everybody will replace, for efficiency's sake, will replace those humans that are interacting with the outside world with the LLMs. And so what you'll be left with is a bunch of LLMs communicating with each other over email in English. And I think that might be the majority of how it ends up. I think these structured protocols like agent to agent and all of those, you've got the same sort of problem that we had trying to get computers to speak to each other. You've got this coordination problem, right? I have to, go and explicitly get my agent to speak to your agent, at least cross-organizational. I think cross-organizational agents will just use whatever humans are using because there's no coordination needed there, right? My agent can email in English. Your agent can use email in English. That's it. Let's just mimic what the humans did. Internally, like if you're building complex internal agents, you might want to use like some kind of defined protocol where they can explore each other's capabilities and exchange messages and interactions in a more structured, coordinated way. So that's the two ways I see agents evolving. But my bet is on agents will just mimic humans, and they will use the same way that humans speak to each other. They will just speak to each other, because then we don't need a secondary protocol. We don't need the coordination. We don't need the technical, right? We can get rid of all of that.
That's interesting. I hadn't thought about it that way, but that's an interesting take. What do you see that's missing in today's tooling that would accelerate trustworthy agent adoption?
Jeez, okay. Yeah, yes, probably a wish list for model developers then, because I think one of the things we're struggling with, especially when you're building more complex. Let's start on the model layer, not really on the tooling layer, but I think it starts with the models. Most of these models come out of the labs that are building chatbots or chat assistants, and it's the models are very much just this two-way communication, and so to actually get the model to coordinate between people, which is a really useful use case, you actually need more roles. You can't just have user and assistant, right? Because there's now two users and one assistant. Right? Who's user one, who's user two? So you have to jump through all of these hoops to make that work. And so we've got that in the platform, but I think natively having more roles within the model's natural understanding, that will be great on the model level. Probably up from that is like, everybody at least, adhering to one kind of standard API will at least make it easier for developers like ourselves, having to like sort of, see every different model uses as a sort of nuance on the API. This one, you're not allowed to put another system message here, and you can't put a system message before this, and every model's got like some different nuance. I think there's a lot of work that still needs to be done. Everybody's sort of taken the OpenAI's API, and then OpenAI has moved to this responses API, and they sort of forcing you to use that new method. So there I think there's some tooling and standards that are needed. So that's model layer, how you interface with the models. Up from that, MCP is looking promising for especially for the chatbot side. Give it this, and then the new skills from Claude. More towards the context engineering side, like just bringing in the context window, a bunch of instructions when needed. That's a very, very nice approach. We've also been using that a long time already within our states model in our conceptual framework. Yeah, so I think iterating more on those, that's where I see those tools going.
Kind of sticking to that forward-looking thing, how do you see Stubber positioning itself as a platform in the future, an ecosystem, an AI operations partner?
Yeah, so it's a platform, and it's a platform for building the more advanced type agents. I mean, you've always got the option of going code, right? If you want ultimate flexibility, nothing's going to beat code. So go down to the Python level, go to a LangChain and build it up from there. I think we're just one layer above that, where you don't have to think of the deployment, you don't have to think of horizontal scalability. You can just think of the higher abstraction that you need in the agent. So that's sort of where we're playing as a platform. And then we sort out the scaling, the horizontal scaling for our customers. So everything's been built to scale horizontally. So you can build an agent today, and you can, have 100,000 conversations tomorrow. That'll all just work without you having to think of that scaling out. So yeah, it's a platform. That's really where we see ourselves, a platform with like 80% of what you need inside the platform. What I learned from software and many years in building software is that every time you cross boundaries between software, that's where the cost and the complexity comes in, right? Every time you need to reach out over APIs and you have to adapt this data format to this data format, that's where the cost and the problems come in. And so in Stubber, we try to put like 80% of what you need in platform. So there's vector stores built in, embeddings are built in, PDF generations, all the communication channels, email hosting, all of that stuff's just built in, right? Just thinking about session handling across emails and across messaging platforms, that's a lot of that architecture stuff. It's got nothing to do with AI that you have to go and think of if you build these type of agents. And you spend 90% of your time doing that and not prompting. So, prompting and the actual use cases that you want the agent to do. So that's sort of what we're trying to provide to customers and people that use the platform.
Well, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask at least one governance question. So from a governance standpoint, what must companies do today to prepare for a future of autonomous agents?
Yeah, I think that's probably a tough one because, we don't really know. It's a new industry, so there's a lot of unknown. So I think, being too strict on the governance side, you might, be prematurely, cutting innovation or not allowing people to experiment. So I think on the governance side, whenever you're launching it, do just disclose, put terms and conditions, call something a beta before running it, live. So just be very, very clear on those expectations up front, right? Say, I think at the bottom of most chat type of things, it says it can make mistakes. Just be open about this. I think that is the key one. And then internally do the standard checks, the prompt injection checks, all of those type of things. Yeah, I'm more on the don't put too many friction points in the path, especially in at the stage we're in. We really need companies to experiment more. We need companies to try this more at this stage of the game.
What advice would you give CIOs or founders trying to move from hype to execution?
Yeah, I think that it's really a signal and noise problem, especially now in AI. There's so much noise. There's so many, everybody's tacking AI onto everything. So really trying to put it in the category of where it is. So I usually say that there's legacy AI, right, which is all your machine learning type stuff, and that's still very valid. Building custom models, optimizing that, driving down that loss curve, that's still got its place. That's sort of that legacy side. And then you've got the LLM side now, which people are also calling AI, or it's everything AI. So it's very LLM focused. And then within LLM focused side, is it augmenting? So allowing helping your humans do work faster, or is it this independent AI thing? And so you want to first sort of focus on what are that area. Try and get categories first, and then focus on one, because otherwise you're just jumping all over the place, trying 10,000 things, and putting everything in the same bucket, right? Your Copilot licenses and your AI platform and we see CIOs, well, I see CIOs, right, get mandates, from the board, like, what are you doing with Gen AI? What are you doing? Show some results, and they will go and sign anything the first thing that really lands on their desk, just so that they can box tick having done something with AI. And I think that's really one of the things to watch out for. Don't it's not a box ticking exercise. Try to understand it. Take your time. Weed through, find a right partner, give them a challenge. You don't need to buy off the front. Get five suppliers, pick 3, give them a challenge and let them compete. And this is perfectly valid in a new industry to weed out, who can actually do something and who are just building demos.
Everything's changing so fast. If you could wave a magic wand and change one aspect of agent design or standardize one aspect of agent design, what would it be?
Oh, I'm probably just going to be very selfish here in just my general frustrations day to day, and it would be like the differences between the different the inference providers and their APIs. I think you got to start on that level. The rest of the standardization can happen at the top level, but this basic one just takes up so much time. No single inference provider is the best at everything. Sometimes Gemini is the best, and you can't be loyal. I often tell our solution architects, a large language model is not a girlfriend or a wife. You do not need to be loyal, right? Because we do see our solution architects preferring a certain model and then loving that model. Like, I only work with GPT-5 and I only work with Gemini. Don't be loyal. You have to test models for different use cases. You have to play the field every time. If somebody releases the model, go and test it out on the new model. And so my selfish standardization is like, it should be much easier for me to go and run Grok 4 fast, right? And then go jump to GPT 2.5 and not have to like manipulate the way I send the messages into the API to such a degree that I'm having to do that in my platform currently, right? I suppose in one side of that coin is that I'm solving that problem on behalf of my customers, so they're probably paying me for that, but it would be nice if I didn't have to spend so much time doing that.
It makes sense. All right, I'm going to try something with you that I've not tried before, so this should be fun. So I'm going to kind of call it the lightning round. So I'm going to ask you like 4 questions, and just the first thing that comes to your mind, just let that be the answer. So here we go. Most overrated claim about AI agents right now?
I don't really follow that many overrated claims. I see a lot of like nonsense claims like that. It's we can boost your LinkedIn leads by 100 times. Make those type of things that's a race to the bottom in my opinion. Like putting AI agents to go and mass produce social media posts that's just a race to the bottom. Like, please stop doing that. Like, nobody's going to be reading these feeds. If everybody's AI agents just generating all the social media feeds, who's going to be reading all this crap? Yeah, probably I don't really have a really crazy overrated one that springs to mind. Sorry, that's probably messing up your lightning round.
No problem. All right, one metric you'd retire and one you'd elevate to measure AI impact.
So I would say that the speed up in the end-to-end process, that's one that I would elevate. I would say that velocity of business. The metric on AI agents that I would retire is, just think, what other metrics, agent metrics. Yeah, like so I think like the number of sub agents or that metric, like, oh, in this whole agent platform, I've got 100 sub agents and 1,000 MCP tools. That doesn't really matter. Like, what matters is like, are you doing the job or not, right? The architectural
I like
stuff.
the velocity of the business one you talked about.
Yeah, the real world impact is where it's at. So any metric that's purely vanity from the architectural point of view, or from the builder's point of view, or like from, I used all of this tech, look at me. Those don't mean anything unless they're achieving real world value. So the real world value metrics is the ones that I would elevate.
If you could give every CEO one reality check about AI, what would it be?
Yeah, so the hype is definitely real. What these inference and these model builders are telling you is when they're giving these metrics and these stats that they're pronouncing, it's when the model does these benchmarks that they do. Those benchmarks are at 100 tries or at 75 tries, and that's, sometimes people miss that point, right? The consistency of these models is not what everybody's complaining. It thinks it's at, right? Those benchmarks are, it got it right 80%. It's got 80% score on that, but that's the average of 75 tries or something like that. So the consistency is not where it's at. That's the biggest thing I think people sort of underestimate, right? You give it a prompt, it'll get it right 99 times. That one time out of 100, that's what's going to break your process. That's the one that's going to take all the engineering time. That's the one that's going to make this thing fail, right, or pass in the real world. That's the one you got to engineer for.
Yep. All right, this is a fun one. Your favorite analogy to explain agents to non-tech folks?
Yes, yeah. Somebody asked me recently, how would you explain what you're doing to your grandma, which is similar one. It's a difficult question, especially for someone like me who's pretty technical. So yeah, I tried, but I did terribly last time I tried this, but let me try again. I'm building an employee that lives in the cloud. So now I'm basically, it's an employee that lives in the cloud. Right? They're on the clock 24/7, never get tired, always there, always answer you immediately. And we're building those workers, digital workers that live in the cloud and are permanently awake.
Good. Well, thank you for that. All right, so just a couple more. So for teams just getting started, on this process with AI agents, what is the simplest use case to pilot an AI agent successfully that you've seen so far in your experience?
I think so it's lead sales lead qualification. I think that's the easiest one, and for many reasons, right? It's easy to sell to the business because it's additive. It's money for free, right? If the AI agent on your website or on your incoming email box can filter more and engage with customers, get you extra customers, it's additive. So it's easy to sell into the business. It doesn't really need that many APIs or deep integration into systems, which is, typically you need a lot of buy-in for that. So those are probably the easiest ones. So outward facing, public facing is sort of a sales role, and then passing leads on to your internal teams. I often tell people, like, how many emails have you received from a business and it comes from no reply? So no reply at xcorp.com. And we literally are like closing the door to customers, right? Why don't we let them respond on those emails? People, organizations and businesses all over the world are literally closing doors in their customers' faces, and literally because we couldn't filter that in. We didn't have an efficient mechanism of filtering that in. Large language models can now do that, right? We can just say, reply to us, because a large language model can figure out if it needs to go to support or sales. So you can really open those channels to stuff that was never done before. It doesn't need to be taking the job or taking the place of something you had existing. It can be new, public-facing, conversational, in sort of a sales role is the easiest ones, in my opinion, to get going.
Now let's kind of flip that a minute. So for those people who are already deploying agents, what blind spots do you see out there that they should address before trying to scale any further?
Spots. Yeah, so if they already built agents, is it augmenting the human, or is it the independent agents? And I think you want to get to this independent. The independent ones are much trickier to build, right? And then when you're talking about the independent ones like we do, to what degree have you solved the problem? Have you just solved, like in my previous example, I'm saying, you're just taking the sales lead and you're pre-qualifying it. So you're doing like 1 or 2, 3 steps in, you're not doing the full job. Like to sell end to end, like to complete the sale is a whole different kettle of fish to go that full ways. The blind spots might be that, you see that getting to 50% was pretty easy. You might think getting the other 50% is just as easy. That's sometimes, that last 10%, that last 1% really is the really tricky part to get right. More of a difficult question there.
Well, Werner, thank you. And for our listeners who want to find out more about you or Stubber, where should they go?
Yeah, stubber.com. That's our website. It's got most of the stuff on there. And we like to eat our own dog food, so chat to our agent on our website. That's the first step. Our docs agent that works on our documentation is also built within Stubber using our own in-house RAG platform and everything. So test us out there. That's the best way to get in touch. Stubber, by the way, is everything you build in Stubber. We call the job that the AI completes for you a stub. And usually from that like ticket stub that you used to get. So we call a job, every job gets a unique ID, a reference ID in our platform, and that's called a stub, and that's where the word Stubber comes from. But yeah, stubber.com, that's our website. Most of what we got is all on there, and then we've got YouTube channel with some videos.
All right. Well, the future of work won't be about replacing humans. It's about freeing them to think, create, and solve at a higher level. Werner's approach at Stubber proves that intelligent automation done right amplifies human capability instead of diminishing it. If you're a CIO or business leader exploring how to design AI agents safely and strategically, that's the kind of work we do every day at Prtelligent. Until next time, ask better questions, build smarter systems, and stay on the edge of intelligence. Thank you, Werner. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Cole.